Welcome to The Spawn Chunks, episode number 359 for Monday, July 21st, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, and it's available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is a transformed Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
I am similar but different to what I was last week because I've been playing with a Lego Transformer that you might be able to see behind me on the desk. And that is something that we were talking about in the Render Distance, along with Stillfleet, a sci-fi tabletop game, and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which I've been watching. So if you want to dive into more of that, more sci-fi talk, then you can check out the Render Distance. It's the extended version of the program. It's available to our patrons at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Folks that support the show get an extra 15 to 20 minutes or more of content every single week, as well as extra hangouts like the one coming up this Saturday, July 26th. That's going to be our Minecraft hangout for July. That's where Johnny and I hang out with our patrons and talk about what they've been doing in Minecraft. And it's going to be really interesting because now that we've had the Happy Ghast around for a while, we're starting to see some builds in our Your Base channel in the Discord that are utilizing the Happy Ghast and all of its features. We also have quarterly hangouts. That's where we talk about the facts and figures, the downloads, how the show is doing. There is one of those coming up in August. So if you're a patron, you'll have access to that as well as our live Discord. So once again, that's patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Coming up on this show, we're going to be talking about the Copper Golem. We're going to be talking about a Reach enchantment, as well as some questions and tips and tricks about building a giant kingdom, all in listener email, which is going to dominate this episode.
Well, speaking of that giant kingdom, let us know what's been happening on the Citadel. What's new in West Hill?
I have been on a single track the last week, and that is working on the west banks of the Spruce River. It is repetitive. It is a little frustrating at times, as people might notice in my latest VOD. And it just has to get done. Like it's one of those things where like not everything that you do in these giant projects is super pleasant and it's effective. I'm happy with the result. I think that's the trade-off is that it looks good, but it's also a pain in the butt because it's a large area. The Spruce River winds down the western banks of the West Hill Valley. It creates a nice border. It creates a nice edge of the build. But right now it's all landscaped version 1.15. So the hills are chunky. There's lots of dirt, and even the mountain is a little bit on the, I guess, OG side. And I had to like months ago, I had to like update that and do like a new stone face on the mountain. I'm kind of doing the same thing with the western banks of the Spruce River, and I'm trying not to create more work for myself. So really what I'm doing is I'm going in with the vertical cliffs, which are between 7 and 9 blocks tall, and just kind of smoothing them out, trying to cut out the 2 and 3 blocks of dirt just down to 1, give it a little bit of a contour. And then I'm just running around and hitting it with 2 tall grass and 2 tall ferns. And once you bone meal the grass and ferns, it really does cover up a lot. It makes the bank feel lush. It kind of covers up your eye from looking beyond that. So it feels, okay, that's the edge. It feels like a border of sorts. And then when I get closer to the water, I'm doing a little bit more custom stuff. I'm still running around hitting things with bone meal, but I'm burying a couple of mangrove leaves to make it look like bushes, dotting the hills with some mangrove leaves, putting in little patches of custom foliage, like using sugarcane and string and the new bush block, as well as some waterlogged azalea bushes to create like little marshy type areas, soul sand, soul soil, and coarse dirt, kind of like roughing up the edge. Unfortunately, or fortunately, as a bit of a challenge, this is all a taiga biome, the whole thing. So my normal go-to of concrete powder, green concrete powder, moss carpet, they don't work because the grass is kind of like that minty green. And then if it isn't a taiga biome, it's a river biome. It's the same thing. The grass is not that lush green that you get with moss. So I have to use other ways to kind of customize the landscape. And outside of little, dots of coarse dirt and roughing up the edge of the riverbanks a little bit, I've just been hitting it with bone meal. The frustration came with the working on the waterfall. Water mechanics in Minecraft are, to quote someone from my chat, the perfect Minecraft troll, and I agree. Especially if it's a natural waterfall that was there, And I just decided to try and make it my own and kind of like divide it and have it like bounce over rocks, and something you've done recently actually on the survival guide in recent months. And it's been challenging going up and down, and I've been using scaffolding here and there when I can, but then you mess up and then it screws up the work that you just did. And so it's been a bit hard. And honestly, it wasn't so much the Minecraft work, like the sculpting and the placing, it was the traversal. Like it was getting around and having the water constantly move you while you're trying to work on something that is like a meter in front of your face. And in Minecraft, I find that can make me seasick pretty quick. Like I can get kind of motion sickness and I just get frustrated. And then when things are going your way and it's close to the end of your stream, like you can sort of feel that kind of like, you know what, it's time to walk away. It's time to like maybe move on down the bank, come back to the waterfall when I have a little bit more, I guess, gusto for it. I'm not so fed up with it, so I'll return to it, and we'll make sure that it gets to where it needs to be. But right now, it's just a very straightforward task. It's not difficult work. It's just monotonous. It's the same thing over and over again. But hopefully, by the end of it, it'll look a lot nicer.
Does it feel like too much work to eliminate the water aspect of it entirely and do something custom with like stained glass, or do you just not like that aesthetically for the kind of stuff you're building around here?
So for stained glass, I could do that, but for me, it's not. I would prefer to have the water flowing. And I've done it before. This is the thing. Like this is not the first waterfall. This is like the third in the area. They're a lot smaller and they're different shapes. This just happens to be the tallest one. But I've done a couple of other ones, even a long time ago, like back when I was working in Dartmouth Meadows, which is the starting area on the server. So it's not something that I can't do. It's just something that on Saturday it just happened to bug me. It just happened to get under my skin. I think part of it also is that it wasn't going as fast as I wanted. I actually the progress on this went pretty quickly. All things considered, like I did about 25% of the bank in a stream and a half. Like that's pretty good. So, I'm on track to finish it this week as long as I stay on top of it. But then the waterfall took like almost an entire stream and I got next to nowhere with it. So I think that setback was like, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I want to finish this project. I'm excited to finish it. And the waterfall right now is like a lead weight on your left ankle. That's just like, not only is it slowing you down, but it's like slowing you down awkwardly. So like you need to get it done. You're not going to look cool doing it, but you got to get there. So, I mean, I think it's a testament to large projects. I think anybody that has worked on one, whether you're clearing a perimeter for a redstone farm, whether you're working on a big project that's just taking a lot of stone or a lot of like one thing, I feel like they all have these hurdles in survival Minecraft that you got to get past.
Yeah, definitely. Working with water physics is one of those things that you learn in the sort of basic ways very early, but then if you want to actually shape it into something that looks interesting and realistic and fun, it can be a bit frustrating. I think that's one of the things, even though I would absolutely love for us to have more realistically generated rivers in survival worlds, like in natural terrain generation, I think water physics acting the way they do may be one of the things that's holding those back. Is because they can't act like natural fluids. It's not going to, the water isn't going to appear in one place and flow forever, and the way it flows down blocks has to behave a certain way and so forth. And so, yeah, I think anybody who can sculpt a river, that's sort of an art form that they've had to hone completely separately to the other landscaping and building shops that you have. Like, it feels like an entirely different terraforming skill set that I think very few people end up mastering. And there are some folks out there who do some pretty fantastic like waterscapes. So yeah, hats off to those people for doing it, but it's definitely a learned skill, I think.
I think it was easier before they implemented swimming. Because the downward flowing water will throw you into swim mode automatically. And it's one of those things that people that have made custom pools or custom rivers or custom bodies of water will notice when they've got like downward flowing water somewhere in the middle of their lake. And as they go through it, it like pushes them into swim mode. Well, a waterfall is like always downward flowing water. So if you get too close and you get dunked on, not only do you get slowed down, but you get thrown into swim mode, and then you have to find a block to stand on to get out of swim mode, and like it's really disorienting actually, like visually as a player. And so I think that was the main frustration. And so one of the things I might do is make a note of where the waterfall is and remove the water, like block the water from the top. And then try to carve out where I anticipate the water to go, knowing that's probably going to go wrong in a couple places. But I can usually go back and fix that. And then like release the water afterwards and sort of like have it be like you've carved something out of clay first and then you've added the water later. And so that might be the approach that I take. I think I might take one crack at it just to kind of see. But yeah, the water mechanics are definitely tricky. And this river, while it was a natural Minecraft river, again, it was all generated in 1.15, give or take. And so it was pretty janky, right? There was parts that didn't connect. There were parts that were way too thin to be considered a river, like 2 blocks wide. And so this whole thing has been smoothed out and given like a nice curve to kind of match with what I wanted to do for the aesthetics of the area. So I've had that under my belt. And so I really feel like the edges of the river I've got down pat. Like that I can handle. The banks are fine. Again, it's just a little bit, I say tedious, but that's not the right word. There's a lot of back and forth. And there's a lot of, the good news is like there's a lot of bone meal, removing flowers, and kind of letting natural RNG kind of fill in the space, which is great because that's not time consuming. But there's also a lot of like having to back up and look at it and then go back in. And when you're feeling like, all right, I need to fill that spot. There's a bare spot that's kind of bugging me. But then as you walk through 2 tall grass and ferns, trying to find that spot up close, a meter in front of you compared to when you can see it, from 30, 40 blocks away, it's not easy. And so it's very disorienting and it gets a little bit frustrating that way. Although one thing that I had been doing, which I think is really subtle and a really fun trick to kind of make your forest look custom, is that I've taken some pale oak logs and every now and again, I've just replaced an existing spruce tree. I've just mined out the trunk and replaced it with the gray kind of mottled bark of the pale oak logs. And it looks really cool. I wouldn't necessarily do it right on the edge. I feel like it would stand out if it was like the first tree in a row. But when it's behind a bunch of other trees and you've got spruce trees kind of passing over it, it creates a bit of diversity and actually looks more in line with like how spruce trees look around here for me. Like I find that a lot of those deciduous trees, did I have that right? I think I have that right. Mm-hmm. They're gray. Like the trunks are not brown. They're gray.
Yeah.
And so having the gray wood in there is really, really helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really smart tip. I see that a lot in custom terrain generation in mods like Terralith or whatever, where they want to create a bit of biodiversity to an area but still give the forests the same shape. They'll use the same pattern of leaves but then just swap a spruce for a dark oak or something like that. So I think it's smart to do that, especially if you're trying to keep the original Minecraft terrain at that point, because you don't want to do everything custom in the spruce forest because that's sort of like outside the scope of what you had planned. I think stuff like that, especially where it's visible but subtle, is going to be a really smart way of doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to save us some comments. Carnivorous trees. Deciduous is the other one. That's the leafy
right. Yeah.
trees. I had that backwards. Just
the word sounded good enough that I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you commented, you didn't listen to the whole podcast.
Ha. He got you, folks. Moving on to what I've been up to, I'm proud to announce, well, maybe not quite proud, but happy at least to announce that after 1,216 attempts, I have acquired the Skeletal Wolf mount on Misadventures.
Awesome.
The way in which this happened, there is a Twitch clip of it as well. It's going to be in a video for YouTube as well this week. I planned, as I often do, my entire stream around just running the Lost Crypt dungeon over and over again, trying to kill this skeletal wolf that's in one of the side rooms and then leave as quickly as possible so I could repeat the dungeon again. I was planning on I was settling in to do that for like 3 hours, and my first attempt in the dungeon, I was still explaining to the chat what the deal was for anybody who was new and hadn't caught up yet. And I go, okay, so you kill this skeleton who spawns from this crypt on this side, and then you kill the wolf, and then it just dropped the item right there in front of me, and I went, that was my first try, immediately kind of huge celebration on stream. And then I had to figure out what else I was going to do for 3 hours, because I hadn't got any builds planned, I didn't know if I had the materials for what I wanted to build next, and hadn't done enough creative planning for it, so yeah, I switched tacks pretty immediately, but very happy to have done that. I did also discover that there's a a build somebody else has done. I went on a big sort of tour of the server and like ran around all of the areas where I thought people had built stuff and tried to like take in as much of it as possible, because it felt like I'd been underground for a few months at this point, and it was really cool to see what other people had been building. I found out one of them has like a cabana kind of like, tropical island kind of build, and there's like a spa, and some of the NPCs that they've installed there sell little custom potions, one of which gives you a speed boost and I think the glowing effect if you drink it. It's like sea pickle juice or something like that.
Nice.
And so I immediately went back to Lost Crypt with that and broke the speedrun record for it, because nobody else I think had used speed potions yet. So I got the top spot on the leaderboard. I'm sure people will figure out my strategy pretty quickly. But yeah, it was really fun to tour the server basically and check out all of the stuff that other people have been building that I hadn't been able to see or participate in, because I've just been so single-mindedly pursuing this quest to have all of the rideable mounts. And I'm not even certain that quest is complete at this point. It's at least complete as of the conditions of when I started it. But since then, the admins have introduced a new dungeon to the server, which I was fortunate enough to be guided through by Fwip and Shelby. So Shubble was the one who sort of said, I want to go and do this dungeon. Like, does anyone want to team up? And I said, yep. We met up, and Fwip had already done it a couple of times, so he gave us a couple of tips for the whole thing, which was good because this was a nether-themed dungeon. So there were wither skeletons, there were blazes.
Oh, wow.
There were all sorts of mechanics where, like, specific setups, like there's cauldrons with a campfire kind of fused into it, and those are the spawn points for wither skeletons. And so there are specific places you can farm the wither skeletons a little bit. There are all sorts of secrets and twists and turns inside this place, and it ends in a boss fight, which I think is a remarkable achievement on the part of the admins to do this in sort of pseudo-adventure mode that they have us going through these dungeons in. And so far, I had been challenging myself to only use weapons and armor I'd found in dungeons. So I started out with a couple of basic pieces from the sewers dungeon, and most of the iron armor and the iron swords I was using I got from the Lost Crypt. Fortunately, this place drops diamond armor, so I'm finally upgraded to full diamond. I've been using diamond tools for a while because I figured I was going to have to get resources, and I'm not going to be chopping trees with iron axes forever. But the diamond swords I got in there as well are now going to get upgraded with all of the fancy stuff that I need on them. And I'm so glad to finally move on from this sort of self-imposed restriction to something approaching the level of technology that the rest of the server has at this point. So, Misadventures has been really fun, especially now that one of my major tasks, one of the major grinds on that server is done. And it's sort of unfortunate that it's not the kind of grind that I can show an absolute ton of progress, like a large build or some terraforming or something like that. It's really more of the, I just had to do this until one day it happened for me. But hopefully, I can move on to bigger and better things on Misadventures, especially now I've got some diamond armor and I can feel like I can run that dungeon a few more times. The other plus side being blazes are in there, and since we don't have access to nether fortresses because no normal structures spawn even if we go to our resource world, that was the first chance I had to acquire blaze powder, and blaze powder means I can make an ender chest. So at last I'm getting a bit of a storage upgrade as well. I can start organizing stuff into shulker boxes, which we already have from a drop in Lost Crypt, and it feels like I can get a bit better set up on that server where I've been working with an odd set of restrictions. It's sort of like kind of like playing in peaceful mode, I guess, where some things just don't spawn in the regular ways, and you have to figure out other ways of introducing them to the server.
I was about to say that it's surprising just how much progress is hamstrung when you don't have structures generating, and the nether is far off or not, giving you the same things that you normally get from the nether. Do you have the nether? Like, are you able to go there?
You can get to it from the resource world. Yeah, you can't go there from the...
Okay, so you got quartz and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's certainly nether resources are available to you, and most of the normal nether mobs that just spawn in biomes there are. So you can barter with piglins, you can do all that kind of stuff. But then, it's really just about the availability of structures and structure-specific mobs like blazes and wither skeletons. I don't know for certain yet if the wither skeletons drop skulls either, because they have a custom loot table. Some of them are wearing banners, and they drop these banners. And so I'm not certain if anyone's going to be able to spawn the wither and make a beacon. I don't know if that's something the admins have gated behind some other sort of task that they have in mind for later, but it's kind of fun being part of this living, breathing ecosystem of a server and seeing what pops up next. And it's a little different from the standard Minecraft survival progression that way. Speaking of which, the other thing I've been doing in Survival Guide is working a little bit around the Windy City. I don't have much to show for it yet, but I have been working on a couple more little terraforming spots. I've decided to expand the scale of the city a little bit to make my train station, where the nether portal is and the giant gateway and everything is, feel a little bit more central. And so now that I'm terraforming back down on the ground, I'm using the Happy Ghast a little less, but I'm working on little pathways and working with the terrain and doing sort of what you're doing, really, smoothing out the rough edges a little bit, and where there are cliffs, making them look a bit more like real-world cliffs, where they be made more out of stone than just dirt blocks all the way down, and trying to figure out pathways and ways of moving around the space that feel like foot traffic is still a thing, or, you know, maybe animals, like maybe horses or whatever, are still viable means of transport, but then a lot of the city is going to be based around air travel and just having taller buildings and that kind of stuff. So the next step is probably going to be to start to block in buildings to get a sense of infrastructure and a sense of the scale, and try and imagine it as a city and slowly go through replacing all of those footprints and foundations with the actual structures themselves.
It's really nice to be able to go through and change those cliffs. I find that something that I do is actually on purpose will add in coarse dirt. Like I'll remove and cover up a lot of the natural Minecraft dirt size or the dirt size of grass blocks, but then it'll look too green, and you have to kind of go back and like add in some part where like the cliff crumbled a bit or something like that. And I find that if you can have those intentional pieces, then it goes a long way. Now, I have the advantage of having a dirt slab, my custom textured petrified oak slab, but even just coarse dirt I find very helpful in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm still in the grass and stone stages of the terraforming project here. Like I still need to get a little bit more texture stuff in later once I'm happy with the shape of everything. But I think, yeah, basic shapes is what I'm going to be working on for a while, and then the palette and everything else is going to come later. But that's another lesson that I can put into the survival guide of how to plan some stuff out with basic shapes and make sure the shape looks good before you add all of the extra bits and pieces after that.
100%.
We're going to move on into the news this week. We have a Java Edition release, actually, after Java Edition release candidate 1 for 121.8. The full release arrived on July 17th. The release candidate was on July 15th, kind of came out of the blue. But it's really just to fix a bunch of graphics issues. To quote the changelog, nothing beats graphical corruption and freeze issues like a blazing, steamy hotfix. Today we are releasing 1.21.8, fixing various issues experienced on certain graphics devices. So to summarize, really, this hotfix takes care of a number of graphical bugs related to Intel Graphics Gen 11 architecture, including the game screen occasionally freezing, corrupted blocks and entity textures, texture flickering, incorrect lighting on entities and block entities, and items in the inventory rendering incorrectly. There's just a handful of bugs fixed in this one, so if you want the full list of those, head over to the Minecraft.net article linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
Achievements now work with add-ons. This was published on July 15th, 2025. You can now earn achievements in Minecraft Bedrock Edition with add-ons installed. Players can customize their game based on their unique needs and taste and still get recognition for reaching the landmark moments in Minecraft's journey. Not only can players earn achievements, but they can also receive the associated rewards, which include character creator items and emotes. The article goes on to explain add-ons, achievements, how to view them, how to claim rewards, and that the update is now available on all platforms.
I think it's about time, really. Like, I'm not a Bedrock player. I've probably got some of these achievements sort of incidentally as I've worked towards other goals. And a while ago, I did like a Bedrock Edition achievement guide. I'm not sure how much of that stuff is still relevant anymore. But I expect Bedrock players are appreciative of that, especially since, as it notes in the article, customizing your game based on your unique needs is something that add-ons are really good for, and if that means accessibility needs that the game doesn't naturally cater towards, it seems like a bit of a shame for custom content like add-ons, which can be really helpful to players with specific needs, to limit them from getting achievements which would otherwise be part of their experience. And so while I can appreciate the concerns about guarding the achievement ecosystem and not sort of cheating your way to like, Xbox gamer score or whatever it is. There's a sense of fair play involved in it. I don't think that should come at the expense of people's experience if they need to put that stuff in. And frankly, a lot of add-ons aren't going to be catered towards just getting you the achievements quickly anyway. So I think it's nice that they've been able to make that change at last.
Yeah, I think the parity is good, and I'm surprised it's taken that long as well. I had the same thoughts about accessibility, things like color blindness or movement accessibility, that kind of thing. And I was also thinking that this might be one of the first differences that I was told about. It's definitely top of mind for Bedrock players, because when we started talking to members of our community that were Bedrock players, that was one of the first things that they would mention, next to Redstone operating a little bit differently in terms of the differences between Java and Bedrock at the time. Now, this was years ago, but still, like, it's been around for a while, and certainly part of the conversation of parity for as long as I've been doing this show.
Yeah, I'm still surprised that Bedrock Edition doesn't have stuff like subtitles in terms of like parity of accessibility settings with Java. I do think subtitles should be a fairly high priority for them, but maybe they've just got other concerns about that and other ways of implementing it under the hood that are a bit more complex than Java Edition or something. I'm not sure, because it's tied so closely with the sound system and everything, and I don't know how that works fully on Bedrock Edition. But yeah, either way, very happy about that. To the Java side of things, I think at this point everyone is champing at the bits to get the Copper Golem in Java Edition, so several people were quite surprised to find that 1.21.8 and the next snapshot that we saw, or rather release candidate in this case, was just another hotfix for some graphical issues. I'm happy to let the team work, personally. Like, while I'm excited to hear more about the Copper Golem on Java Edition, we've got a version of it in Bedrock Edition for now, and I expect anyone who's really desperate to get their hands-on experience with it can try that out, and I'm happy to just let the team come to it when they come to it. I imagine it's also like summer holidays. People who've got families are going to be busy making sure they've got some time to spend with their kids whilst they're off school and that kind of thing. So I imagine we'll hear about the Copper Golem on Java pretty soon. But in the meantime, I'm fine with there just being like a couple of graphical fixes for people who need it, right?
No, I agree. My notes are pretty simple. Like, crash is bad, fix is good. And these, I read over the crashes, and like, they're really problematic. Screen freezing, all that kind of texture flickering. Like, it's the kind of thing that would really hinder your experience playing Minecraft, and it's important to fix it, especially when it affects Intel chips, because like, that's a lot. It's a lot, potentially a lot of players. And so I'm glad they've got that out of the way. It's one of the reasons why I don't jump right on to update the Citadel when a new version of Minecraft comes out until the snapshots start rolling out for the next cycle, because I feel like you never know when there's going to be a hot fix, and where we have a dozen or more mods that I've got to keep track of on the Citadel for performance reasons and our maps and things like that, then it's a simpler process for me to wait until it's all done. So we'll probably jump to 1.21.8 whenever the next snapshots roll out. I'm excited for the snapshots for the Copper Golem, more so because I think they might take the opportunity to either iterate, make some small adjustments, get additional feedback, take the feedback that they've received, and maybe add some things that we didn't know about yet. So I think that the Java snapshot might not just be access to the Copper Golem on Java, but also more information about what's coming next, more news. And again, I'm probably going to be starting up a snapshot world when that happens.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea to get familiar with them at least. I don't know how you feel about this. I think we talked about it in the past. Like, I've seen a few people who are still a little bit frustrated by the version numbering scheme, and like the fact that this is 121.8 and hotfixes are following the same numbering convention as feature updates. I think for some people, the names of the updates, the sort of drop names, haven't necessarily stuck in the way that Mojang, I think, is hoping that they will, so that people can center the discussion around it being called Chase the Skies instead of it being 1.21.6. But personally, I've not let it bother me that much, especially since Java and Bedrock have once again broken parity in their version numbers. So if you're using the numbers, then you're not necessarily certain to be talking about the same version number anymore anyway. But yeah, I'm kind of curious if eventually we're going to see that, like, I don't know if the version numbers are ever going to be obfuscated from players entirely, but I do wonder if we're going to see that discourse change and people are going to start adopting the names of things more now that we've had this routine of gameplay drops and feature updates that we have now.
I feel like I have to keep the update numbers in my head just to keep everything straight, like to keep what features have come with what update or drop. And I think because of the complicated language or the overlapping language that they've used with drops, the numbers allow me to keep it straightforward. Like I can just, it doesn't matter whether it's a drop, whether somebody calls it an update. If I call it 1.21.7 versus 1.21.8, everyone will know what I'm talking about. And I think that's one reason why those numbers are probably going to stick around. Certainly within the development community, like anybody that's doing mods or data packs, I think are going to be on top of that, especially because like in addition to the version numbers, there's also the data pack version, the resource pack version, and that goes up multiple times, per snapshot cycle as they make changes and add new things, that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's going to be around for a while. I don't know if from a marketing standpoint, they'll ever get into like calling it, chase the skies .1, .2, .3. I feel like that could just be even more complicated. So I don't know.
Yeah, and the alternative being like making hotfixes a further decimal point removed from the version number, and then like Bedrock Edition sort of has that version numbering scheme already, and so yeah, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, I feel like, for Mojang. So either way, we're going to move on into listener email, which is going to be the bulk of this episode, since this is our chunk mail dispenser, and we've got lots of stuff in the inbox that people are excited to talk about, including the first one about the copper golems. So we can bring that back around to something that we're all a bit more excited to talk about than the version number thing. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep the emails short and sweet if you can. It really helps us include them in the show more easily. But Joel is going to read us this first one.
First email comes from Dr. Papaya, Copper Golems, and Junk. Hi, in the current Minecraft Bedrock beta, Copper Golems will hold onto items that they cannot sort and be stuck in a loop. Instead, I believe Copper Golems should drop items that they cannot sort into barrels. This would give a player a way to manually sort items which the Copper Golems cannot find a place for. This could be faked by having an empty chest with a hopper below that is Copper Golems always checked last, but I believe implementing this feature as a built-in capability would be a significant improvement. Dr. Papayas was spun to death by a Copper Golem head. Stay away from the head.
Yes.
It's very spinny.
It is, and honestly, this is a sidebar here, but with regards to the spinny heads, there is a version of Copper Golems that was implemented on Misadventures, just a modded version that people came up with a while ago, and it's genuinely such a strong difference how when Mojang have come up with their Copper Golem design and rigged and animated it the way that they have a certain character to them that is really lacking from the modded versions of them. And I think it's not necessarily like a discredit to any of the modders who've spent a lot of like hard time and effort putting something into the game and giving it maybe a little functionality, but now that Mojang have decided to implement it as a very deliberate feature, I think it's so obvious the level of quality and like iterative stuff that they've put into those designs in order to make them feel like they can fit in the modern game. And I think it's really interesting being able to compare those two side by side, just what the community does with the idea as presented to them, and then what Mojang does when they've had a bit more chance to refine it. But refinements is really what Dr. Papaya is talking about here, and I think a lot of people have had that feedback of, hey, Copper Golems end up walking around holding items a lot, and we talked about that in previous episodes with the idea of players being able to go up and take the items off them, similarly to how they do allays. But yeah, how do you feel about the idea that they should just drop stuff in barrels when they're done with it?
I like the spirit of the idea. Like, I understand the frustration from Dr. Papaya, but my go-to is like, well, how does Mojang communicate to players that the Copper Golem puts items, it doesn't sort into a barrel? Like, I guess you just have to watch it and see what it does. But then once the barrel has an item in it, does that not then become a sortable container, right? So
yeah, I assume they have to sort of split the behavior between the two different types of containers, and that if barrel, then anything I can't sort into chests goes in here. But yeah, it does complicate things significantly, I think.
Right. I don't know if it would be complicated on the back end, but it would be complicated from a player communication within game, right? So like,
yeah,
the Copper Golem has put something in a barrel. I am then anticipating him to put the same thing in the barrel again. Am I? Or because that's what he does with chests, right? So like, I feel like that's an odd thing for me to wrap my head around. I can see copper golems potentially putting items that they cannot sort into a hopper. That would make a little bit more sense. It's less confusing. You don't use it as a storage thing. I think that's the thing for me. Like it's an item that has an inventory. It is usually not something that you see used as storage. It's often pointed somewhere else. The items that go into a hopper are usually leaving that particular area or that particular space and going into a chest or into another area. And so if a copper golem was like, I can't find a place for this. If I can't find a place for this, is there a nearby hopper I can put that in? Again, the problem there is that, like, well, what's the range? You know, like, is the hopper part of a storage system that the copper golem is working in? And does he start to put, you know, items in random hoppers, right? So like there's problems, but the idea of a hopper, I think would be one way to do it. I actually think it would be neat if copper golems had an interface. And I think this is what players are getting at when they want to have more control over where copper golems put things. And that I wonder if you could just program the copper golem. So if you were able to right click on a copper golem and see an interface and have it be just like 3 or 4 buttons, like chest, barrel, shulker box, hopper, as an example, just off the top of my head. And you click on one, and that is where, or the type of container that golem is going to search. So golem A is going to search for barrels, and you know that. And so because you know that, you're not going to put him near barrels that you don't want him to sort into. And the restriction there would be like, you can only select one at a time. So if you press the chest button, then all of the other buttons are not something you can press. You can only have a golem choose one at a time. And I feel like that might be an interesting way to do it. Again, not knowing the back end, that could be more complicated, but that's the kind of thing I feel like the emails that we get about the copper golem, asking it to be able to put items in different barrels, asking it to do something with items that can't find a solution for. I think that those are things that players want that kind of control, and I feel like there could be a better way of giving it to them without having it be something that, like you said, becomes an issue with like the containers and confusing the golem and having the golem put items in different containers that you might not want it to. You know, like, because people, like, for example, people use barrels as decoration all the time. I do constantly.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I have that issue with beehives. I use beehives as interior design all the time. They look like bookshelves and cabinets. And so I do that. And I've definitely had bees decide I'm going to use the beehive inside the kitchen as a beehive instead of the one in the garden. And then I've got honey dripping out of my bookshelf. Right. So like there's definitely issues like that exist in the game now.
Yeah, I have to deal with bees in my kitchen occasionally, but in real life, but I don't have to deal with them making entire, like, you know, honey production facilities somewhere in my kitchen cupboards. But yeah, I think with regards to the barrel thing, I think maybe it leads to too many false positives just based on the copper golem's behavior right now. I think there are too many occasions in which the golem wouldn't search the right chests, because there's a bit of trial and error involved in making sure that the golems go to the right range of chests anyway. At least with the version of it we have in Bedrock Edition, I think there's still some fine-tuning to be done with regards to if you have double chests, which side of the chest is placed first seems to be like the side that the copper golem tries to travel to, and so there's like a few issues there. But I think there would be too many occasions on which it would skip over the chest that you really wanted it to put the items in, and not having looked through the right chests, it would just go and drop stuff in a barrel, and then your sorting system kind of breaks. Instead of having it just cycle back through, okay, let me search 10 chests again to try and get rid of this thing. I think they don't just stand there idling with it, they just look for chests continuously until they find something that they can drop it off in. And then that's just a matter of you going up there and adding one of those items, or if they implement this as a solution, taking the item right out of the copper golem's hands to free them up to do whatever else they can do. I think there would just be too many instances in which it could sort stuff into a chest nearby, but it defaulted to the barrel because it was easier, or just because it skipped over one of the chests in the sequence. I don't think it would work at all well in the storage system that I have set up right now, where I have barrels over all of the chests for all of the miscellaneous odds and ends. So I have all of the solid blocks filtered, like all of the logs are filtered into chests, and then all of the different products that you can make out of those wood types are all in the barrels above. That's sort of the opposite of what you'd want with a copper golem sorting system anyway, but just leaving barrels around, like you said, even decoratively, I think would lead to this coming up against too many problems. I feel like this is also a use case that comes out of people experimenting with the copper golem to see what it can do, and finding that this behavior occurs where they get stuck holding something. But if you're designing a storage system around the copper golem itself, that changes, because you're in charge of the input and the long-term storage, and the copper golem is just there to sort stuff for you. So in the intended use case, the copper golem, if it ends up holding an item it can't sort, you messed up because you provided it with an item that it didn't have a place to go. I think we've all done that thing though, where we've accidentally thrown in one of our tools with a bunch of blocks that we were just frantically shift clicking out of the inventory to move them into the chest, and you have to sort of panic and scramble to make sure that your diamond pickaxe doesn't end up in the overflow of something that's going to trash it in a fire block or lava or something at the end, right? So I can imagine that, yeah, you don't want to end up with a situation where a copper golem is holding your enchanted diamond pickaxe, and then you've just got to spam an empty chest somewhere nearby for it to drop that off, because otherwise it can't get rid of it, and you can't pull it back out of the golem's hands. But so I don't think it shouldn't end up with some way to remove an object from its hands. But I think if you're trying to design an automated system, you design it around the conditions the copper golem gives you, and you make sure it's airtight before you walk away. You make sure that no other items are getting in there other than the ones that you definitely want sorted into those chests. You make sure you have an overflow somewhere, or a means of draining items out of those chests if they get too full, and so on and so forth, right? I think the advantage that the copper golem provides is that, assuming you have one stack of any given item, it can store, with 10 chests that it can check, assuming they are 10 double chests, around 540 different items, which is a lot. If you just have one stack of each in the chest, it will always find that, and it will always just deliver the stack. And so theoretically, given that there are about 1,600 items in the game as of 1.20 was the most recent figure I could find, if unstackables weren't an issue, 4 copper golems could theoretically sort every item in the game into less than 40 double chests. So theoretically, if you set the copper golems upright and you have 4 golems, you're never going to find a situation in which a copper golem can't find a place to put an item it's holding. So you have to think ahead and arrange for that to happen, rather than, give the copper golem just a random bunch of stuff and hope that it places it in the right places. You've really got to use it like it's a sorting system, rather than using it like it's just a little helper that's intuitively going to know what you want.
When you have a hopper under a chest and you are draining items from that chest, does it take from the top left first, or does it take from the bottom right first?
It's always, yeah. Everything always works from left to right, top to bottom, if it has multiple rows, yeah.
Right. So your items that you're using to filter that chest to tell the golem what could go in there could be lined along the bottom. So you could have a chest with 9 items in it, and even if you drain it after a certain level, it would not drain the filter items. They would stay in there for the golem to then use to refill. I've always thought that, having, when you've got these chests that the copper golem is looking through, having a single chest, so sacrificing, I guess, one of the 10 chests, having the 9th chest with just a hopper underneath it would make sense. If you've got everything else sorted, here are the 9 chests with items that I want the copper golem to put in them, all figured out, and then this one chest at the end is just empty, well then I guess the only thing that you have to rely on is the copper golem going to check that chest last? Mm-hmm. And how do you predict that? And if it's not predictable, then that's a bit of a pain. And that's, I think, the pain point that players are thinking about, right? Because otherwise you could just have the copper golem put something in that chest, and then the moment the chest is gone, or closed, then the item goes away. I mean, that's if it's a trap chest. If it's a regular chest, the item would go away immediately after they put in the 16 items or however many the copper golem had, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably going to be the majority of use cases for them, is like you have, let's say, like mob farm storage where you've got gunpowder and all that stuff. Like it all goes into a copper chest. The copper golem sorts all of that stuff. When you get the occasional chicken jockey coming through and you get like a raw chicken and a feather, it just throws that in the chest at the end because it doesn't know what to do with it. That drains into something that sorts the feathers and maybe smelts the chicken for you so that you can have cooked chicken as part of it as well. And so, yeah, like I think there are enough situations where people are going to get used to the way the Copper Golem works. I think once we've had more opportunity to play around with it in snapshots and previews, and once the behavior is maybe made a little bit more robust and logical, then I think simpler is better. I don't know if we necessarily need something like it also interacts with this type of storage container under these specific conditions, because that just makes it more complex and more difficult to convey to the player. So I think that's really where I land on it. Speaking of copper, we can move on to our second email. This one comes in from Barnaby Gaming with the subject of copper pickaxe usability. Hey Johnny and Joel, I love the idea of copper tools, but I have a few practical issues with the new copper pickaxe. The pickaxe progression chain of Minecraft is already complete at this point in time without copper. I don't see myself making a copper pickaxe in a new survival world, as its advantages over stone are not enough to cover for the extra inventory space it takes. What additional use could you see for the copper pickaxe? Would you use it for anything? Barnaby Gaming was slain by a zombie while sorting his many pickaxes.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the copper pickaxe is slotted between stone and iron, right?
In terms of overall usability, yes. It can't mine anything that a stone pickaxe cannot. There are no materials that a copper pickaxe is required for that you couldn't do with a stone. But in terms of overall durability, I think that's the major improvement, is that a copper pickaxe will mine about 3 stacks of material, whereas I think a stone pickaxe will only do about 1, maybe 1 and a bit. So it's at least twice as durable as a stone pickaxe with the same tier of mining ability.
Right. And is it faster at all, or is it just the duration?
I believe a little bit faster. I'll have to check the wiki on that, but yeah, I think it's a little bit faster.
So the reason I bring that up is because my first thought when I was reading this is that, you make a stone pickaxe at your first opportunity, and, either you use your wooden pickaxe as fuel for a furnace or you toss it. And so why wouldn't you just, when you found copper, make a copper pickaxe and then just toss your stone pickaxe? Like, I mean, it's like you've got a better tool. You don't need to have the stone pickaxe with you anymore. So nor do you have to have the wooden pickaxe. So like, I feel like the argument that there's a lot of pickaxes in your inventory causing a clog, that's a you problem. You can very easily solve that. You can just throw things away. So I think that, in terms of its intention, as you mentioned, it's meant to kind of like give you that extra durability and remove the monotony of like, oh, my pickaxe broke again, until you find enough, iron to make an iron pickaxe. Also increasing your mining capabilities is along with your durability of your pickaxe. I can see the appeal though of a copper pickaxe being used for something specific, especially for endgame players or something beyond progression, because for me, like, I have zero reason to even craft a copper pickaxe, right? Unless I'm hanging it over a door in an item frame for something specific, like I've got netherite stuff. Copper pickaxes being maybe very fast to mine copper, like I could see that being an interesting application. Copper pickaxes having much longer durability than iron, but not be as fast, could be interesting. Like, it's not going to give you more capability than iron, but what if the copper pickaxe was actually something that lasted longer than iron? I don't know the logistics of that. I think in the real world that wouldn't make any sense because copper is softer. But like, I'm just trying to think of like some ways that Minecraft could make the copper pickaxe more appealing. The drawback there is that as an endgame player, like, I don't want yet another item that is going to be something I need to carry if I want to mine copper more efficiently, because then that's causing problems with my already clogged inventory as it is. So yeah, I think it's a hard sell for me to try to add functionality to copper beyond what they've already done. There's not much I can really think of.
Yeah, I think the whole point of copper tools is just them being more durable stone tools, and because copper is so abundant in early game, I think it's just removal of that point of friction where players realize they can't really do a whole lot with the first proper metal that they find, which in my experience, you're going to find copper more swiftly than you find iron, especially if you're a new player. Like, you and I both know that if we can't find a good cave nearby, we can always look around for like higher hilltops, mountains. The way ore distribution works, you know, we know that as experienced players. I think newer players especially are going to find that copper pickaxes are pretty useful to them, especially since they'll have so much copper and not a whole lot of uses for it until they decide to build with it much later. I think I just did look on the Minecraft wiki, and a minor correction: stone pickaxes can manage about 2 stacks worth of mining, and then copper can mine an additional stack on top of that. So it's not a huge, it's like 1.5 times as durable as a stone pickaxe rather than like double. But either way, it's a bit more durability. And I think what they do for your first big caving trip is mean that you don't have to be constantly remaking stone pickaxes, right? You'll get a lot further with a couple of copper pickaxes than you will with stone, and you don't need to keep all of those pickaxes with you. Put them in a chest, throw them out. I burn my first wooden pickaxe on most of the survival runs that I do that aren't like a long-term series like Survival Guide, where I want to keep my first wooden pickaxe for the sake of nostalgia for the series, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I think a lot of people are going to just like chuck out whatever stone tools they had in favor of the metal ones because they're shiny and new and they can be used for a little bit longer. Honestly, though, I think copper armor is a way more valuable addition than the copper tools, just because that gives you caving confidence. We mentioned this in a previous discussion, but I think the tools sort of have to be there if armor is there, because there aren't many things that you can make armor out of that you can't make tools out of. I think leather is really the only one. So I think it makes sense for there to be a full set of tools and armor. If they're going to implement one, they may as well implement all of them. I think it's worth thinking outside the survival box, though, because a lot of us are just going to be thinking about the progression when it comes to tools like this, whereas copper tools means another tier to give players in minigames, and in minigames, the sky's the limit in terms of additional properties you want to add to them. If you want to give copper tools inherent fortune or inherent silk touch versus the gold tools having more or less of the other, I think there's a different level of enchantability for copper tools as well, but I don't think that's going to factor into most people's gameplay with how low the durability is in general. But copper tools are also, like you said, more opportunity for decoration. You could do fun stuff with item frames and armor stands. You could even give them 2 copper golems and not give them a free chest to drop them off in, and then it looks like you have a little copper workforce, even though they wouldn't actually do anything with them. I think it could be fun for like the roleplay and the feeling of life in an area, that you have this little group of miners. You could set up a little copper mineshaft diorama where the golems are actually working to make more of themselves or something, right? And I think modders and data pack authors can obviously then go ham with that idea. Like, you could have fun coding the copper golems to actually use copper tools that you gave them. And even then, it's a fun way of limiting how automated block breaking could be, because they wouldn't be able to mine anything above stone tier. So if you wanted to add that in as a little like fun helper for the player still has to gather certain types of material up and above like iron and beyond. So I think with copper tools, they would be limited in what they could do, and that would make them still pretty effective as a little workforce for the general purpose resource gathering, for cobblestone and tree chopping and that kind of thing. So I think, if anything, copper tools thematically make a reasonable amount of sense. I think they're redundant in terms of the survival progression, but there is a lot more out there than just the survival progression when you look at how broadly Minecraft is played and how many different playstyles there are.
They're also not the only tools that really don't have much use. I mean, gold tools exist, and we haven't had anybody, for as long as I can remember on this show, complain about, hey, like, I can't use gold tools for anything really remarkable because I get iron and then I don't need to get gold anymore. And I don't think I might have made them out of mistakes before, or again, to decorate something, but I've not made gold tools in so long. I don't remember when the last one was crafted on the Citadel. So, I mean, copper tools not being super useful for progression is not a unique case at any rate. Our next email comes in from Eclipse RM, Reach Enchantment. Hi, Pix and Joel. On episode 358, you posed various ways the crab claw could be used to increase block reach, but what if there was a chest plate specific reach enchantment, like Swift Sneak for leggings, that increases your block reach? Alternatively, it could be a tool enchantment to increase the reach of a specific tool. Eclipse RM failed his bucket clutch even with an increased reach. That would be me.
Should have enchanted that bucket.
I've ever done that. Yeah. I don't think I've ever done that successfully. So even with reach, even with a buff, I still feel like I would faceplant. I'm not super good at it.
I managed to save myself with a water bucket clutch, falling from the sky base that I was building on Misadventures. I think it was maybe 100 or so block drop. It had already killed me once because I didn't have feather falling on my iron boots, and I was quite happy about that. It's probably the best one I've done for a while. But yeah, nice. I have mixed feelings about this one, because when it comes to enchantments, I think the enchanting system is already kind of bloated. Like, how often do you try and enchant a book with something useful and universal like Unbreaking 3, and then you get all of the specialized enchantments out of the enchantment table? You get, Riptide, Loyalty, Density, Punch, Aqua Affinity, stuff like that, stuff that only applies to one tool in very specific circumstances. I feel like adding enchantments sort of feels like you are contributing to the problem that eventually will have to be resolved if they ever reformat enchantments or streamline the amount of stuff you can do with an enchanting table, revisit that system along with, armor repairs and anvil repairs, that kind of stuff. I think enchanting maybe needs a bit of a rework long term, and so just shuffling off functionality like this to another enchantment feels like it's adding to the problem. In the same way that inventory management is a problem, I feel like enchantment management also becomes that. The other things to me that help enchanting feel interesting are things like synergy and mutual exclusivity. So how does reach work or conflict with other enchantments? Is there an opposite thing to reach that they add as well that it has some sort of counterpart that it can't combine with? I'm not sure what that would be in this case, but the idea that reach would have some sort of counterpart to incentivize you to think more tactically about your armor, I think is the gameplay that Mojang wants out of sets of armor, but so typically the player will just end up with whatever works in the broadest range of scenarios, which is why a lot of people favor protection as a regular enchantment over specialized protections like projectile and blast protection and so forth. So I think the difficulty with making it an enchantment and not a new tool is just the fact that it adds more bloat to the enchanting system already.
Yeah, my go-to criticism for this was that if reach was applied to a chest plate, then, most people that want reach are builders, which means they're probably going to be endgame players, and I don't wear a chest plate. I wear an elytra.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't want to have to take off my elytra to wear a chest plate to reach something. And I get the logic, right? Because to reach something, you don't want to put that enchantment on boots or legs, because that doesn't make as much sense as even though there aren't any real arms on a chest plate, it does have kind of pauldrons, like shoulder pads. So it sort of feels like it might affect your arms, or at least your torso in that way. I thought maybe a helmet, increasing your vision and therefore increasing your reach could be a good way to logically do it. I wear a helmet regardless, and I actually wear a gold helmet because, like you just mentioned, set it and forget it. I want to worry about all of the things less. So it's a gold helmet because that keeps me from having piglins bother me when I'm in the nether sorting through chests or doing anything like that. And so I feel like having those little things attached to helmets would be a good way to do it if you wanted to do the enchantment route. And I agree with you. I feel like the enchantment stuff is bloated. I haven't enchanted gear in a very long time. And if I do, I've learned recently that books are a real pain. I would much rather just enchant like a sword. I'd rather start throwing out... I'm at the end game situation where I'll start enchanting diamond swords, and if I don't like them, I'll just disenchant them on the grindstone. Or even just if I ruin something, I just toss it, compared to trying to do books. And there's so many enchantments now that the RNG is not as fun as it used to be. I remember years ago watching Etho in his long standing Let's Play series doing some enchantment, and I was learning how it was working, and he was getting excited over stuff because it would only be a couple of rolls before he would get something good, right? And so the loss versus win was a little bit more 3-1 as opposed to 14-1 or higher, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's one of the things that players might have for feedback for enchantment, is that it's not as fun as it used to be. I can see it being applied to tools, but then the problem is if it affects player reach, not just mining reach. So if you can place blocks at a distance, not just mine blocks at a distance, then how does the pickaxe affect you as the player? Therefore, do you only need to enchant your pickaxe and have it on you, and so it doesn't affect your axe or your shovel? And then like, how does that work in terms of like, do you have to have it equipped? Like, do you have to be holding it, using that one for it to work? But then like, if you're not holding it, you can't hold it to place blocks. You have to hold the block that you want to place. So like, communicating that to the player, I think could be a little bit tricky as well. It's the kind of thing where like I kind of want, for things like this, as Minecraft kind of progresses through wanting or pitching the idea of more abilities for players, this is where I feel like the inventory needs to widen out and have other slots for something unique and fun and different. I think about a game like Diablo that has like talismans or trinket slots, and that you can put, I mean, we've seen it in Minecraft mods too, but you craft this thing, this crab claw talisman, and that gives you more reach, and then it doesn't affect anything else. It's in a different slot. You don't have to sacrifice your elytra or your chest plate. You don't have to worry about enchanting a tool. You don't have to worry about the enchantment table. It's a thing that you make, and then if you have it, then you can do the thing that it says that you can do. And maybe the progression there is that you don't get to use those trinket slots until you are a certain level, or you've achieved a certain amount, or you have to craft the trinket slot. I'm not sure how that works. I'm pretty sure in Diablo you could add gem slots to your gear at some point. Correct me if I'm wrong, people that are super Diablo players, but like, there was a certain level of like, oh, I only have one gem slot, I want to. If you can't find a piece of gear that has two, you could make a second gem slot with enough experience and like the grind to do it. But that kind of stuff I think would be interesting, especially if it was something that did not affect combat, but instead affected like the long-term playability of the game. Like, you are just going to be able to do more creatively by going through this progress. And I think that that's something that we do already. Like, you're going to be able to do more creatively in a more efficient way if you beat the Ender Dragon and go get shulker boxes, because then you have all this mobile storage that you can bring around with you. And like, that kind of stuff I think is really, really cool. And I'd like to see more of it, because I can see the potential of things like reach in the game. I also think that you'd have to be careful with it, because like, as someone that's been doing a lot of landscaping with endgame tools, like the amount of times that I overmine with my shovel, and I don't even think it has top efficiency. I think I'm at like efficiency 3, because like 4, I make mistakes all the time. And with 3, I make mistakes about 25% of the time. But it's still really annoying when you've just bone mealed a bunch of stuff, had it look good, and you go to mine a block that you want to remove, and you move 4. And you're like, man, like the mouse button was heavy today, and I made a lot of mistakes. But I could see that happening even more so with reach, until you get used to it. Like, you're going to be mining stuff that you didn't think you could touch, and all of a sudden, like, you've just destroyed something that you just built because like you thought you couldn't, or you had the wrong tool. You're like, how do you differentiate a pickaxe that has reach from one that does and one that doesn't, right? Like, there's a bunch of stuff in there to consider.
Yeah, I think long term it would start to create maybe a little more player frustration, I think, than like it feeling like a vast improvement. I feel like it would be one of those things like when you start a new world and you don't have Depth Strider anymore, and suddenly you realize that you're moving like absolute treacle in water, and you go, oh, okay, great. So I'm back to sort of feeling like I'm hampered by this, and like looking forward to getting Depth Strider again. I think the problem would also come from if you had some tools enchanted with reach and not others, and so you're used to your reach being a certain distance with a pickaxe, but with an axe it drops back down to 5 blocks, and suddenly it feels like you're sort of, again, it feels like you're losing something there more than you're gaining something by having it, which, can feel a little bit tricky to balance. You're borrowing tools from somebody else. Do they have reach? Do they not have reach? And suddenly, like, it interferes a bit with the ecosystem. The other thing suggested here is the idea of having it attached to tools or armor, but having different effects when it's applied to either, because armor would help with like physical placement, whereas tool reach would be mining. And that'll be a first for Minecraft, I think, where the tool and the armor having the same enchantment produced sort of different effects, because it didn't really think that the tools were going to be the thing that would help you place blocks further away. So that'll be maybe a little bit difficult to get across to the player, that the enchantment does different stuff depending on what you enchant it with. I think one of the problems we had for the crab claw was that it was only for building with, but not for increasing your mining reach. At least that was the pitched version of it. And so I wonder if maybe there's a catch-all tool that can do both. But yeah, it seems like something maybe that Mojang has a mind to tinker with in future and maybe playtest in the experiments tab or something, but I don't know for certain if it's going to land with a lot of players, especially when, once again, people have been playing this game for 16 years at this point, and that parameter has not changed. You've always been able to mine blocks that far in front of you, and I think changing that at this point is going to change a lot of people's muscle memory, and that's not always a great thing when it comes to a game this long-lived.
I will say that I felt like I had a longer reach in Bedrock, and I feel like somebody in chat confirmed it. And it wasn't a bad thing. It was not a bad experience. I quite enjoyed it. So it would probably take a bit of getting used to if I was doing much building, because I wasn't doing much building in that playthrough. I was doing mostly mining, survival, exploration, looking at vibrant visuals, but I did like the fact that I could reach more.
Yeah, I think there's also a thing in Bedrock Edition where your mining speed is slightly faster if the block is further away, and people use that for insta-mining a little bit faster and that kind of stuff. So there's a bit of nuance to it, like a surprising amount for Bedrock Edition miners. We're going to move on to our final email for today. This comes from Spidey Steve, and the subject is where to start mega builds. Dear Johnny and Joel, I have been a Spawn Chunks listener for about 2 years and love the show. I have a question for Joel specifically. How do you start a massive project like on the Citadel? I recently joined my friend's long-term world and I'm planning to start a medieval kingdom, but where do I start? What biome do I use? Thanks. Spidey Steve fell off the dirt outline of his mansion, surviving on half a heart and then a creeper.
I've been there, especially with landscaping. The creepers leave large holes. It's not a stone house. If it's dirt and grass, say just start over. Goodbye. 2 years, and thank you for the kind words. That's awesome. Happy to have you on board. I want to start this off with saying that I think that you have to kind of go into this with the idea of the kingdom that you want to make first. So if you want to make a desert kingdom or you want to make some like a sandstone kingdom, then you should probably be looking at some of the warmer biomes that might look good in. You don't have to, but I think that choosing the biome that complements the build would be great. You could also make a purple castle in a desert, and it would look really cool because yellow and purple are complementary colors. So there's things like that you can kind of consider. But I really think that, the biome that you choose is definitely going to influence the overall vibe, especially when you get into landscaping later. If you're going to be in a desert, remember, if you want to add any green, your grass is going to be very brown. So you might have to remember about moss and azalea and that kind of things. I would also consider the coming vibrant visuals and the biome tint. If you like the savanna now, you may not like the savanna when vibrant visuals hits. So consider that. Same goes for maybe an icy biome, like everything's going to be very blue. So consider some vibrant visuals, maybe bop around in Bedrock right now if you have a chance, or when vibrant visuals comes to Java, you can always check that out and see kind of like what the biomes are going to look like. I don't know that shaders currently really have much for biome tints. There's certainly a different light at different times of day. Sunsets are usually pretty golden. Sunrises are pretty yellow, but you can experiment with stuff like that. I chose the location for West Hill because it was a large plains/sunflower plains biome. It had interesting features like 3 different rivers bordering it on the east, west, and south. It had a big mountain to the west, which is how everything got named. It's just West Hill. And the mountain was pretty cool looking. It needed some tweaks, but it was still pretty good. I was actually thinking about making like a dwarven kind of fortress with the mountain being the entrance of it. But then I decided on doing something a little bit more general in terms of the build, in terms of making a medieval town with West Hill. And all of that was still 1.15 world generation. So I had to do a lot of tweaks. But overall, it was a cool place to play in. I liked looking at the mountain. The rivers created some natural borders. They also provided some natural traversal, made me able to have like a canal in the city, stuff like that. And so having this low-lying plains, it was rolling hills, it wasn't flat, meant that I didn't have to clear cut a forest. I didn't have to do a lot of landscaping. I wasn't dealing with a lot of ups and downs. There was no giant ravine in the middle of everything that I had to cover up. So it was pretty easy in terms of getting started. And I decided to kind of roll with the landscape. So I even though 4 years later I'm still nitpicking at stuff, I decided to try not to just flatten everything. So West Hill, the city, is actually on top of a natural increase in height in the area as it got closer to the mountain. So that was a natural spot for me to put the keep, because it would make sense for the fortress of the area to be on the highest point, and then the town kind of cascades down around that. Depending on the scale that you're thinking about, I feel like having some natural borders, which you can always move later, is a good idea. I did not anticipate building all of West Hill Valley when I started West Hill. It's just something that kind of happened. I'm glad it did. But if you want to avoid scope creep, you know yourself better than anyone. If it's not something that you want to spend years on, then maybe consider a smaller area, something that has like a natural forest around it, something dense like dark oak or a taiga forest. That kind of stuff will kind of help you be contained. A coastal town, you can only build in one direction, like inland, unless you're going to be building out into the ocean. So the ocean could be a natural barrier as well. And rivers, like I mentioned, they work for sure. I think that one of the best ways in terms of kind of getting started, which is very much where you seem to be, is I found that thinking practically, I don't really have a big story for West Hill. There's not a lot of lore. I don't know anything about the people that used to live there or live there now. For me, it was more about like, what's the practical use for things? Like the keep is in this position. What are the canals used for? What buildings would go on the canals? Oh, there's a canal. That means there has to be a bridge. The bridge was one of the first things I built. And it made sense, right? As I'm working around this town, I'm going to need something to walk across, as would the people that are going to live there. And I think that with, a build, say, let's just use a stone town as an example, like something like West Hill. Where does the stone come from? Like, are you going to get it from nearby? Or are you going to have to go to the end to get your purple bricks for your purple, castle? Work that into how you're building. If you're going to go to the end, like, is there a nearby end portal? Do you have to go to the nether first? Like, all of those things could be considered in the build that you're making. If it was something like a stone quarry, is that next door? Is that a build that you could do? Is the road that the people use to bring the stone to the town to build it going to be a key feature? That would be a great place to start. And I think the thing that held me up for the longest time was just starting. And there's a certain amount of fly by the seat of your pants that happens with these kind of builds that is really good. Most cities and towns are iterative. Like, there's some places in North America that have like just tons and tons of layers, like old subway systems and stuff that have been paved over and built on. And like New York's a really good example. I'm sure lots of cities in the UK have lots of depth to them. So that kind of thing is natural, and it's going to happen, especially if you're on a project that you're going to be working on for years, because as you start, Mojang could make updates. They could add new blocks. They could give you ideas that you don't have now. And so I find that the best way to kind of get going is to just pick something that makes sense. A tower, a lighthouse, a bridge, a road, start there. And then as you sort of work in the area, you'll start to get a feel for like, I think that this hill that I keep on looking at is going to be a great place to put my castle. And then so you do that. And then the castle needs a wall. And then the castle, how does the castle get fed? Like, where does the farm go that feeds the castle? Like, those kind of things, if you think about them logically, you don't have to be, a playwright to come up with a huge, story for your area. You can, but if that's not a strength, then just lean into the practicality of it. I find it informs your builds much faster, and it's much better to get going than try to plan everything out down to the letter, because it's a lot of work, and perfection is the enemy of done. So I would just, once you've figured out the style, the overall vibe, kind of like proof of concept, pick a biome and location and just start building. It's time consuming in survival, but you can always tear something down, right? Like if you don't like it, or if you decide that, well, that tower is not the style I want it to be in, you can either make something up like it's an old ruin, or you can just dismantle it and no one will know the difference but you.
Yeah, I think plains biomes naturally feel like the best place to start, because there's so little tree cutting that you have to do. There's so many situations where you'd want to build in a jungle, but you have to clear out all of the jungle wood first. You have to make sure that you've cleared all the leaves out of the way, and there are always going to be some leaves that are attached to a nearby tree, and so they're close enough to a log that they don't despawn, and then that all sort of cascades into more work you have to do before you can even lay down your first building blocks. So I think plains biomes are going to naturally be it. You also have a lot of visibility from plains biomes so that you can see the landscape around you. One of the reasons I picked the location of the Windy City is because I wanted it to be near mountains. I wanted a view of a cherry grove in the background somewhere, and that combination of cherry grove and frozen peaks really appealed to me just because of the colors that are involved there. So if you put all of those elements together, you end up typically building on plains biomes with a nice view to whatever else is nearby. And then, like Joel was saying, those mountains maybe become the place where the people of the medieval kingdom you're building have that mine that they get all of the stone for the city from, and that's, maybe also where trade comes from and currency, because you can dig up all sorts of rare resources from that. Maybe you're thinking of copper as currency, and maybe the gold is like only reserved for the posher parts of town and that kind of thing. So you can do all sorts of stuff like that, inspired by the terrain, as well as having the idea beforehand and kind of running with that long term. Like you can sort of find yourself with a happy medium between the two and some synergy between your idea and the place you end up building. Likewise with coastal towns, you've got to consider maybe they're a lively port trade, so they end up like exporting stuff. What do they export? What do they then have to import because they don't have it where they are? Is there a lack of solid stone because all of the stuff around them is built on kind of sedimentary rock and sand, and so all of the kind of metamorphic rock, all of the kind of diorite and stuff has to come on barges upriver or from along the coast or something like that. So you can have a lot of fun just playing around with the setting of those things, especially within the world of Minecraft. I think sometimes you will struggle to find a biome that feels large enough, but remember that the world is going to extend for many thousands of blocks in every direction. Depending on, if the server has a world border set up, you might be more limited, but if your server admin is happy with you having the world seed, maybe you can run that through something like Chunkbase and find an area that looks good that you can scout for a nice big plains biome that you have a lot of room to expand without having to clear cut a nearby forest or something like that. You can also consider biome color in that the forest is probably going to have a different grass color, especially if you're on the edge of like a dark oak forest, for example. The grass color changes pretty significantly. Do you then want that to feel like a different part of your kingdom? Once you eventually cross that boundary, does it become a more lush and verdant place? Is that where a lot of the farmers keep their farmland because the soil is fertile, or is that more exclusive to people who can afford to live there? So many little ideas will cascade off one another at that point. But I think choosing a location is one of the most important things. It's something that we give a lot of importance to, but it's also one of the things that matters the least once you start building, because then it will really become all about how you make your mark on that area rather than how the area ends up shaping and informing your idea to begin with.
It's a lot easier to lean into the landscape and help the landscape inform you than to fight against it. So like if you wanted to make like a flat or a very linear build, something that's very modern or something that's very like just a lot of straight lines, less straight roads, then something that's very hilly, you're going to have a lot of work ahead of you, right?
Yeah.
So if you go into something like a plains biome or a desert or something where like if the biome surface doesn't matter, like say you're paving something, like you're doing a modern city, a desert might be great because like if there's not going to be much grass, it's going to be all concrete and the deserts are pretty flat. Or if you have to remove stuff, sand is very easy to remove. You're going to need a lot of concrete anyway. So like there's some benefits in considering where you're going to build in terms of like the headaches that you might run into later. Same thing with something like an air-based city, a lot of airships and balloons and things like that. You'd probably want to build high up. So maybe like a meadow, something that's still going to give you some freedom, but there's going to be lots of peaks and cliffs and stiff edges that you can like attach things to and springboard from and kind of come up with different ways to get around and stuff like that. So I feel like that, once you have a good handle on the kind of town that you want to build, I mean, obviously I know that they mentioned that it was going to be a medieval town, but like the kind of medieval town that you want, is there magic? Is there not magic? Is it very practical? That will kind of really help you set up for success in the future.
Definitely. Good advice all round, I think. And that's probably where we'll wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. So thank you so much for listening, folks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday, and you can join our Hangouts, where the next Hangout coming up is the monthly Hangout, where you can share what you've been up to in Minecraft this month, and let us know if you've been enjoying the Happy Ghast as well. We currently have 275 patrons. We would love to add more as the weeks roll on. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays, as well as a video version on YouTube and Spotify. There is also an audio version on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on our website, thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the Render Distance, the extended version of the program.
My name is Johnny, but I'm not a go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season, but look out for some misadventures content now that I've finally got that wolf. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Easiest way to find me is just Joel Duggan on your favorite social media platform. I also have another podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment called The Citadel Cafe, and that's available on your favorite podcasting app. Going to be talking about Superman with my friend Steven this coming week. I am also streaming on Twitch Tuesday through Saturday. My summer schedule has been adjusted, though. I'm now streaming at 10 a.m. and that is 9 a.m. Eastern in the UK. Sorry, in the US. But it is about 10 a.m. for me here. So I'm just streaming a little bit earlier because the days are getting warm and it's a lot easier to do it in the mornings. Plus, I get to enjoy some sunshine, as I think everybody should. So, but tune in. We are pushing to finish up West Hill, and that's 10 a.m. Weekdays on Joel Duggan on Twitch.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, so the perfect spot to build must be out there somewhere.